Hello, MedTech Insight enthusiasts. This is Dr. Jennifer Joe with my co-host, the fabulous Dr. Ami Bhatt. When Dr. Bhatt isn't hosting the show, she's running the Massachusetts General Hospital telecardiology program, seeing congenital heart disease patients and teaching at the Harvard Medical School. When I'm not hosting the show, I see patients in the emergency room, urgent care, and hospitalist settings. We both support a number of traditional and non-traditional medtech and up-and-coming digital health startups. We both believe healthcare can be better, both for the clinician and for the patients. You can find us giving local, national, and international talks, and you can look for our first ever Springer textbook in digital health to be published very soon. MedTech Insights is a live weekly interactive talk show where we interview two guests in digital health every Tuesday at 12 noon. It is live, so we do really appreciate our viewers when you ask questions, engage with our guests, and share who you are, where you're watching from, and where you're interested, what you're interested in. MedTech Insights can be viewed on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And all shows are recorded and available after the fact on our website at Vanguard.Health/MedTech Insights. Be sure to follow us and join our mailing list and look for us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Over to you, Ami, coming at us not from your typical Mass General office.
No, I am coming today from the beautiful island of Nantucket. The Nantucket Cottage Hospital was recently renovated. And we've expanded cardiovascular services out on the island through Mass General and Nantucket Cottage. So I'm out here doing a clinic. I'm in between patients so that we can do this, and then I'll go back to them. But it's a really nice way to be able to see a different population of patients. Extraordinarily excited about today's show. If there is any such show that describes kind of women power better, today is going to be it. Extraordinarily excited to bring on both of our guests. And so we'll go ahead and get started. One important thing to please remember about our show is that both Dr. Joe and myself, as well as our guests, represent our own opinions and not those of any of the institutions with whom we collaborate or for whom we work. And with that in mind, we are going to have Shareene Lindquist come out first. So Dr. Lindquist is simultaneously an OBGYN near Atlanta, Georgia, and she is the founder of PraxSim VR. I'm always excited on the virtual reality days. So her career in medicine is still young. She graduated from residency in June 2020. Prior to medicine, she had a 12-year career in technology, actually, and then came to medicine. She's working to merge her technology and her medical careers now. So PraxSim is a startup that looks to fully integrate virtual reality into surgical education and training. So let's bring on Shareene.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me.
We are excited to have you with us. Shareene, now you're also talking from a beautiful place. Where are you there, Shareene?
Yes, I am actually on my first vacation since starting practice down in Rincon, Puerto Rico.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Good. Excellent. Well, I think everybody has worked so hard over this past year with COVID, and it is not going anywhere. That's a discussion for another day. But nice to see that you are also kind of learning to breathe, because we know burnout rates are high. So it's important. The other thing that prevents burnout is doing something that you love and being passionate about it and being driven by it. And so you've taken your technology history and then your medical training, and you are putting it together. So for our audience, would you tell us, Dr. Lindquist, kind of how you started and what made you follow this path?
Absolutely. So after I graduated from college, I actually worked in technology for about 12 years in both New York as well as California. And I knew at some point that I really wanted to go into medicine. I'm just kind of given some of what I saw in East Harlem. And by the time I applied to medical school, I knew that, there would be some merger of medicine and technology. I didn't quite know exactly how that would happen. And it was those, the infamous third-year rotations where you're trying to figure out exactly what it is that you want to do. And you get a little bit of a taste of every field, that I started to realize what life could look like for me. When I was training, when I was on general surgery as well as OBGYN, just all of the surgical fields, I think for me, as someone who came from such a strong technology background, I was really perplexed at why we just didn't use more technology in surgical education, especially with training. All I kept thinking is VR is so great. It's finally at a point where it's really accessible to consumers where you can do so much with it. For me, it felt as if this was the best opportunity to be able to integrate VR into surgical education in particular, right? Thinking about teaching anatomy, thinking about the ability to practice procedures prior to going into the OR. But of course, that's not necessarily the easiest hurdle to overcome. And so I thought about it a lot during the end of med school as well as residency. And mostly during residency, I was working, just trying to figure out how to be an OBGYN. And at some point, I took some time, and said, okay, I really want to pursue this because I trained at a community hospital out in California. We had some pretty tough cases. And the thing that I kept thinking is I really want a way to prep for my next OR day without having to go to LINS to read about all the steps of the procedure, without having to go to Netters to look at all the anatomy and review the surgical anatomy in a slightly different way, or try to find yet another video out there on the web to look at how someone else has done the procedure. I really wanted to be able to have something that I could integrate all of those different but important steps into one that would allow me to get ready for my OR days, right? OR days could be, if you're lucky, I guess, I don't know. They could be as short as like 3 to 4 hours, but they could be as long as 12, depending on the cases. And I really wanted to be able to have all of those, ways of training all rolled into one.
Yeah.
And so towards the end of residency, I really thought, this is the time for me to try to figure out how to build this thing. I had no idea how to start a company, things you don't learn in med school, right? Like how to do anything except be a doctor. So I reached out to people that I knew, who then put me in touch with people that they knew, and the network just continued to grow. And at some point, I got to a point where I found a group of developers out in Costa Rica that said, hey, this sounds really interesting. We'd love to work with you on it. So I took some money out of my own pocket, which was, an interesting thing to do during residency, and said, okay, hey, we're going to build this prototype. And so I worked with, like I said, a group of developers out in Costa Rica. And it was really interesting because I speak medical Spanish. I do not speak VR Spanish by any stretch of the imagination. So simultaneously teaching, trying to figure out the English Spanish divide, but then also teaching programmers and developers how to understand not just anatomy, but pelvic anatomy, and not be grossed out by some of the things that I saw, that I showed them in videos. But then also to be able to translate that into a VR version, like a simulation of a surgery, was challenging in and of itself. But once we got through it and we kind of figured out where some of the sticking points were, I'm actually pretty happy with our initial prototype. It's pretty early, but we did some really great work. There was a lot of laughter and some tears and some general walking away at some points, but
there always has to be ups and downs. Well, this is fantastic. I think we have 2 people who have been watching who are kind of putting in some comments, so maybe we can say hi to our audience.
Yep. We have Craig DeLarge, who is watching. He is a digital health strategist, mental health advocate, and educator. Craig, great to have you watching. Yes, Craig, great to see you, and glad that LinkedIn informed you that we were going live as well. We also have Dr. Kristen Borb. Hi, Jen and Ami, happy to tune in today. And then she's just letting us know what she is working on. So Kristen, thanks for sharing. Clinically trained internal medicine physician who's practiced for several years and reinventing the private sector. So glad to have you watching, Dr. Borb.
She makes a good point about the skills for business, similar to what you said, Dr. Lindquist, right? This is an area that we're not training our medical students in just yet. It's maybe a conversation for another day, but one that at least I know the 3 of us feel strongly about. So taking a step back to VR before we show some video, I believe you have.
Yes.
I think it's interesting because VR has moved, as you've said, outside of medicine quite rapidly. And one of the challenges that we have in thinking about VR and thinking about tech in general is this issue of trust that keeps coming up. And when you're talking about direct-to-patient care, there are many more hurdles that we want to jump through in order to ensure that we're not hurting people. However, the fact that we still, and for those people who don't know this, when we train in medicine, absolutely, Kristen, so relevant and on point. When we train in medicine, we actually keep a log. We literally keep a procedure log. Here are how many of this I did. Here are how many of this I did. And the fact that you are trying to take that learning experience so fresh in your mind too, which is really important. I think it's important that you're young in the medical profession with technology background, because when you get further away from training, it's really hard to remember all those details of the different things you need to learn. But academics is an area where we can take with VR and we can really push it. And we can push it and we're not going to directly hurt patients. We're going to be able to really just give more exposure. We're not going to necessarily replace the in-person operating room time, but we're going to augment it. And so I think if there's a place where VR belongs, medical education is an ideal place for us to grow it. So with that in mind, sorry, go ahead and let's share your video too, because I want people to see what you have.
Yeah, I was just going to make a really quick comment before I go to the video. It's exactly that. I want to make sure that everything that I do is seen as augmentation, right? There is no substitute for the in-person experience. There really isn't. But we do have exposure issues. And I think that we know that. There's literature on it. And so for me, it's about trying to fill that gap, right? Like thinking about all the changes that have happened in medicine over the last 20 years and saying, okay, we don't necessarily see enough inside the hospital. Here's what we can do to augment that.
Yeah. So as you're showing the video, I will comment for the audience, when public reporting first began, we really did see that institutions that had good quality and safety measures, double checks, but also ones that had higher volume tended to have fewer complications. And so again, volume and training is probably important and will probably improve the quality of care and the ability to see different situations, right? I can see a place where with VR, you offer 4 different things that could have happened in that operating room as you are doing that procedure.
Precisely.
Jen, are you running the video or can Shareene do it?
Shareene, I'm waiting to see it in my feed. Okay, perfect. I'm seeing it in my feed now.
I just wanted to make sure you were done talking. I didn't want to interrupt.
That's perfect.
So, just to explain what we have here. So this is a sped up video of the PraxSim demo. So it's all done in virtual reality. So what you're seeing is exactly what you would see once you put a headset on. And what we wanted to do were a few different things. One, we wanted to make sure that the solution that we provided was completely mobile. Just thinking about myself as a resident, not wanting to go to a simulation room in the basement of a hospital to continue practicing. But again, thinking about what I would want in the comfort of my own home. So that was one thing. Another is that we simulated the operating room environment. It's important to be able to hear, and you can't hear it in this video, but we've integrated some of the normal sights as well as sounds that you might experience. And then, of course, what you can see here is we're actually training, simulating a laparoscopic hysterectomy. So this is, I didn't want to just focus on open procedures, which I think are sometimes a lot easier to learn. Laparoscopy obviously requires not just that the steps of the procedure or that you understand the anatomy, right? Like all the things that you would normally need to do, but that you have the ability to control other instruments and that you can integrate new depth perception or manual dexterity into what you're doing in order to get through the procedure and keep the patient safe. And then, of course, I wanted to make sure that we integrated just like the steps of the procedure, right? So I want you all to kind of think back to what I was saying about having to go to one textbook to understand steps, another textbook to get anatomy. The third, is watching surgical videos. And then the fourth would actually be being able to practice the actual procedure, which depending on the resources of your institution can be really difficult to do. And so that was the goal when we set out to build, this prototype, was to make sure that we were able to touch on all of those things.
That's fantastic. So I see our other guest is smiling backstage, ready to come and chat. So Craig, why don't we have you answer Craig's question and then we'll bring out Carmen Ortiz-McGhee. Craig is asking, what lenses does it run on, Oculus or HTC, and can it be downloaded from the VR app stores? Shareene?
It actually runs on Oculus. We designed it for, to be completely mobile. And at the time, the Quest, we were doing development, the Quest was actually the only one that did not require a laptop. Right now, it cannot be downloaded from VR app stores. I'm actually just working with individuals who are interested in testing it out, just to give me a bit of feedback. So if you want, I would love to be able to send it to you, and we could talk about how you could integrate it and then see what you think. And then we can actually use that in our next demo session.
Perfect.
Craig does have a lot of questions.
Yeah. Does it work for teams of professionals who can collaborate?
Not yet. This is the very first prototype, but that is the goal. The goal is obviously for, I think about myself as a chief resident, for me to be in my home and my junior resident to be, wherever it is that she or he wants to be, and for us to be able to practice together. But that was just my grandson. Okay.
Got to start young.
That's great.
His grandson, exactly.
Craig, we love it. Fantastic. All right. I think it is time for us to bring out Carmen Ortiz-McGhee, our second guest. So she is the Chief Operating Officer of the National Association of Investment Companies. It's the trade association for diverse-owned private equity firms and hedge funds. Their membership is comprised of more than 130 members managing over $250 billion in institutional capital. And as Chief Operating Officer, Carmen provides strategic oversight over all of their programs and initiatives, manages their organization's key industry alliances and corporate partners. On a personal note, she is somebody that we all look up to, who has really taught us the value of not only speaking up, not only ensuring diversity and inclusion happen, but having the data behind it and explaining in a very clear way what the purpose of diversity is. You would hope that we don't have to do that. We still have to do that. And so, she's really been a leader for many of us. So excited to bring Carmen on to join the show.
I love the clapping.
Thank you for joining us. We're so excited to have you with us. So for the audience who maybe doesn't know you as well as we do, will you just give us a little bit of background on how you got here? And then I think you have some slides talking about the National Association of Investment Companies that might help them better understand the work that you're doing, and we can go from there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I'm so honored to be with you all. I'm the only one without the MD at the end of my name, so I will do my best to live up to the example and role models that you are all providing. But I am a change agent, and I think that was really born inside of me, being a Latina woman growing up at a time in Northern Virginia when there were very few of us. My mother, was a good Puerto Rican mother and put me in Catholic school right away. As soon as we moved to the area, and I was kind of always on the periphery, right? There were not a lot of people like me. When I got to the University of Virginia, I was one of 1.67% Latinos, the majority of which were the Latin American blue bloods, really, who could afford the international education. And so, a girlfriend of mine and I, who was a native of Colombia, or whose family was from Colombia, we launched an organization called the Latino Student Admissions Committee to increase an understanding of the patchwork that is Latino culture, as well as to increase the enrollment of American Latinos into the university. And that really started me on this advocacy journey. I have spent almost my entire career advocating on behalf of diverse-owned businesses and mostly diverse-owned asset management firms. And so that's where the NAIC certainly comes in. But even when I was in private equity and when I was in corporate America, there was just this passion about creating access and opportunity for people like me, shared experiences and all of my peoples. When I think about the NAIC member firms, these are people who have checked every single box that society tells them to check. They've graduated from the right schools. They've followed the right pathways. They've cut their teeth at the blue chip firms. And in that path, obviously experienced challenges and obstacles, But when they were part of big brands, they were more accepted. When they had the audacity to leave and launch their own firms is when those obstacles multiplied dramatically. And so I find it appalling that people who have absolutely earned the right and proven themselves to be extraordinary investors that absolutely outperform the market continue to face those challenges. And so I am blessed to do what I love and am passionate about on a daily basis. I'm inspired by the members that we represent, and certainly challenged every day by the work and responsibilities that we as an organization have.
That's fantastic. I mean, the way you express that, I suspect that anybody who is watching, no matter what field they're in, understand that feeling, right? I think it's true in healthcare as well. You cut your teeth at, the blue blood place, you do the training, you have the pedigree you're supposed to. But longer term, you step out and all of a sudden you have to work 10 times as hard to be able to get that. So I would love to be able to share some of the slides that you had been showing us in prep earlier, because I think it gives a great sense of the National Association of Investment Companies and how diverse some of these companies can be. And then I would love to engage, once we do that, into a little bit of a conversation, because I'm already seeing some comments about it online where people are really asking, can you show us the numbers that diversity is important? We'd like to be able to share that too. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the NAIC, if you'll go to the next slide, I think it's a wonderful sort of breakdown. It's a bit of an eye chart, I'll admit, but those are some of the NAIC members. As Ami mentioned early on, we do have about 130 member firms that are diverse and women-led and/or women-led. And they span the full capital continuum, from venture capital to growth and buyout. We have private credit, we have hedge funds, we even have real estate in there. And so our goal is to help them with the work of the work, to be more successful, to raise greater amounts of capital, to be able to deploy that, more effectively across all of the industries that they are interested in. Across the membership base, they have about 898 portfolio companies. We do have a group of members for sure that invest in healthcare. We even have healthcare equity-focused venture firms. Those portfolio companies hire and employ about 715,000 employees across the globe. One of the things that we do in order to do the work, to facilitate the work and to support the needs of our members is we have these sort of multi-year corporate partnerships with some of the leaders in the space. So groups like EY and Goldman Sachs and Korn Ferry, Lockton and TPG and William Blair, all of whom have put a stake in the ground that they want to be more supportive and more engaged, certainly in diversity writ large, but specifically with diverse managers. Similarly, we build relationships with organizations that represent institutional investors. So right before this, I was literally on a roadshow with the Institutional Limited Partner Association, where we had 17 institutional investors from Canada and throughout the United States who we were bringing together with our member investment firms. I think it's a great segue into the next slide. So this is how NAIC shows up on behalf of its members. We have three main buckets of focus. The most important is our ability to increase access to institutional capital. So we have a variety of programs. Our roadshows, as I've mentioned, are one of them. We have kind of a large conference that's a roadshow on steroids in the fall called the LP Meetup. Our fundraising advisory support tracker has become one of the most valuable services that we provide, where we leverage NAIC's relationship with over 130 allocators across the country to make direct introductions, warm introductions for our member firms, so that we're able to speed up the process of getting on the radar, which, as everyone knows, when you're raising capital, whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're an investment firm, That's always the hardest call to make and get returned. We also are focused on educating the marketplace. And so that takes the form of two primary forms. One is research focused on the performance of diverse managers. And I'll talk a bit about their outperformance and how research continues to prove over and over again that diverse managers do indeed outperform the general marketplace. And then we provide training for institutional investors at the trustee and investment staff level through our Engage program. You'll see the other programs listed there as well. And then the last bucket is addressing industry challenges. And for us, that's really a pipeline issue. How do we get more women and people of color into alternative investing? And how, once they're in, do we ensure their success? And so two programs I'll mention here. One is that Next Gen Symposia. This is the full title is Establishing the Next Generation of Private Equity Firms, which is relevant for venture capital as it is for real estate, as it is for hedge funds, because it's really focused on standing up an institutional grade firm and raising institutional capital. So we take you through everything you need to know to effectively raise capital, to picking your partners, building the team beyond the partnership, all of your back office compliance and reporting requirements, all of your fund formation, legal considerations, risk management, wealth management, seeding, everything that you need. And lastly, our women, but not least, our Women in Alternatives program. We have a three-pronged approach to getting women into the business, helping them move up through the business, and when they're ready to start their own firms, wrapping our arms around them organizationally to support their success as well. So I think I have a couple more slides that speak more to the performance of managers. So here's the research. And these are just two of many studies that talk about how diverse managers perform as compared to the general markets, the benchmarks, the industry benchmarks. The NAIC has a proprietary report that we do in partnership with KPMG and Aon. And it has, over the course of the 18 years, proven that diverse managers outperform their general market counterparts over good market cycles and challenged market cycles, long-term periods and short-term periods. And so in this last report that was published in 2019, it showed that and these are just our members, this isn't even the full universe, right? Outperformed the Burgess median quartile in 78% of the vintage years studied over a 25-year period.
That's great.
And then, of course, our members produced higher DPI 64.3% of the time since 2000. So the same is true for hedge funds. And so NAIC, certainly we are dedicated to this work, but the James L. Knight Foundation is also partnered with Harvard, in fact, to publish research on the performance of diverse managers. And this particular report focuses on hedge funds, but it also talks to the point that if you were to build a portfolio of diverse managers, of high-performing diverse managers, that you could indeed generate above market returns in that portfolio alone.
That's fantastic.
So it's really exciting to see the data support what we all know to be true.
So we have a couple questions, Carmen, coming in about your thoughts as to why.
Why we outperform?
Yeah.
So I love this question. I was sharing with my fellow speakers here on the screen as we were preparing for this, that an LP asked us that question very pointedly: why do diverse managers outperform the marketplace? And the truth of the matter is, we really have to, or we don't succeed. We have to be more risk averse. We have to have differentiated pipelines for deal sourcing. We have to be better than our peers to be taken as seriously. There are a lot of studies that show that all things being equal, Black managers, particularly Black male managers, are put through higher, more rigorous decision-making processes than their white counterparts. And so we have to be better, faster, stronger in order to have access to the same opportunities. And the truth of the matter is, when we fail, we don't get a second chance, right? And not only do we individually not get a second chance, but that reflects on the broader diverse marketplace. And so it's easy when one firm fails to say, see, we tried it. Nah, we're not going to do that again. And so our managers absolutely are returns driven, and there is no need to reduce underwriting requirements to engage with diverse managers. Diverse doesn't necessarily mean small. It does not necessarily mean new, right? These are seasoned investors for sure. And so they've gone through all of the right channels and steps and processes. But in each of those has had to be better than the average bear.
Interesting. So if we turn that a little bit back towards Dr. Lindquist, let me ask you a question, because we're talking a lot about VR and training, right? And VR and education and the different places where people are being educated. And if you think about the institutions where there may be less OR time, less money for those institutions, fewer opportunities to have those procedures, fewer experts perhaps. We also know that those are some of the places where we have a larger number of minority population students who we are really trying to bring up through that pipeline. Do you want to share just a little bit your thoughts about kind of virtual reality training and how that may, change our pipeline?
I mean, it's funny because as Carmen, as you were talking, that's literally what I was thinking of. Like I mentioned earlier, I trained at a community hospital in California. I did not, by choice, go to any of the big name institutions. And I knew that coming out of that institution that I might be at a disadvantage just because of my surgical experience or the people that I had access to. And it's not to discredit my attendings at all. They were amazing surgeons. They absolutely were, but there is something that is different. When it comes to simulation equipment or the ability to practice, because we were a smaller program, we had four residents per year, as opposed to some of the bigger institutions that have anywhere between 9 and 20 a year. We just didn't have the funding to be able to support the larger, more expensive simulation equipment. And so when I said earlier that the thing that I wanted to build was the thing that I could personally benefit from, I didn't just mean myself. I meant people who look like me, people who want to be in community hospitals, because that's the patient population that we really care about. But people who also know that our training and our surgical experience might not, whether or not it is or isn't, it's kind of in the eye of the beholder, but it might not look as it might if, say, I went to a larger institution that had 20 residents a year and that had a larger pocket of money to be able to provide additional training equipment for their residents. So when I decided to build this thing, like I said, I wanted to build something that would be lower cost, but that would be repeatable, not something that residents would have to build on their own from random tools, picked up from, the local arts and crafts store, but something that we could actually still afford, but that would still be good. That part was important. That would still actually simulate the experience that we would need to have to be able to continue to go out, support the patient populations that we wanted to support, and simultaneously be incredible surgeons.
That's so true. So Dr. Joe, if I can address something back to you, because you are a woman, entrepreneur, leader, and as we're talking and we see how, Carmen and Dr. Lindquist and you have made your careers, I think the pipeline is extraordinarily important, and there is a lot of effort to give back to bring people. I love this, Carmen, in and up and then beyond, right? That concept, I may steal that from you for medicine too, because it's so true. Talk to me a little bit, and Jen, I'm going to ask you to go first, and then both Carmen and Dr. Lindquist, but talk to me a little bit about that glass ceiling, about that last step, about that last 2 steps. How do we make that last part happen? What can we do for each other across our industries to make that happen? Are there any key thoughts you have about that? Because I see some questions coming in about it. Dr. Joe, I'm going to have you go first.
You're going to have me go first? I'm suddenly a guest on the show now.
Yeah, you are. I've been meaning to ask you this question forever, and so today's my chance.
When I reflect on my career and what it has and has not done, the biggest concept that I think about these days is the concept of ambition. Meaning when I was growing up and when the idea of what do you want to be Who do you want to be? What do you want to do with your career? I think the concept of ambition was just a really dirty word. You wouldn't give the concept of ambition to a woman necessarily, or a girl. And I think I internalized the concept of ambition as dirty as well, because I still have that. But I think ambition is incredibly important, meaning, what is ambition? It's the ability to see yourself as a leader, to see your face reflected, to believe you can actually do something and imagine it. And I think we have to give that level of inspiration, aspiration, confidence to the young women today. And I am impressed and amazed by your daughter, the women that are coming up, and their, I think, grasps of the world concepts and who and what they want to be. But for me, that was the biggest struggle. And then I just want to come back to what Carmen was saying. In the literature, so I'm not going to say I came up with it, but there's literature written about the concept of the minority tax, meaning if you're a person of color or if you're a woman, you might have to get more credentials than someone else who may have the same position. And you see this over and over again, I think, the concept of a minority tax. Like my mom used to say, Jennifer, I want you to become a doctor so that you have something to fall back on when your husband divorces you. But the concept of you always need a backup, right? You always need an MD or a PhD or a master's, PhD, and some MPHs. And to get to the same level, it's the concept of, Carmen, to what you were speaking of, the concept of doing more to obtain the same level. I don't know. That was a little rambly. Sorry.
No. I think there's such good points, and I love the thought of ambition is not a good word. Carmen, I would love your maybe reflection, just to start with on that commentary and whether you still see that happen. I feel like I do in medicine, but and then your thoughts about finishing off those last few, really getting women into positions of power, taking the managerial position and pushing it further.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me okay? Because I'm seeing a lag on the video, but can you hear me okay?
Yep, it's okay. There is a video lag, but we can hear you great. So that's
great.
All right.
Okay, perfect. So I'll just keep talking through it. So absolutely, it still exists, right? This question as to whether these people who have clearly proven their capabilities, their expertise, their ability to do what they're saying they can do, right? They've got track record, they've got, longstanding careers where they've received awards and recognition, industry recognition. But there is this continued sort of perception of enhanced risk of investing with women and people of color, almost as, okay, so you did it when you were at the Carlyle Group or TPG, but we're not quite sure if you still know how to do it now that you're on your own, right? Mm-hmm. Even though we have one member, it's the most amazing story. A gentleman who actually built the distressed investing business at the Carlyle Group. And when he left, he had an extraordinary career, incredible results generated, tremendous revenue growth right across his portfolio. And when he launched his own firm, it took him 400 meetings to raise his fund, 400 meetings in 4 years to raise his fund. Now, he performed so incredibly well in that first fund that the next fund he was raising, he raised almost $2 billion of investment capital in 4 months in the middle of a global pandemic. So, right, it just speaks again to the initial challenges, but once you're proven, it becomes infinitely easier, right? Once you're proven in your own. Now, how do we go from to the next level? How do we help support each other to the next level? I think there are myriad ways, right? We can absolutely connect to networks that provide the training, networks that provide the relationships. But I think one of the things, and this really ties nicely with what Jen was talking about, we need to feel comfortable being seen. We need to feel comfortable letting people know what our aspirations and ambitions are. And it's one of the things, culturally, certainly as a Latina, we don't typically feel comfortable with that. We're taught to be humble. We're taught to just put our heads down and work hard, and we'll get noticed, we'll get good jobs. but that's not really the case, right? There's actually a book that I talk about at every turn called Empower Yourself, the Organizational Game Revealed. And, you know, hard work is like 10% of what it takes to advance, right? Because that's table stakes, right? You have to have the expertise and you have to be a hard worker to move up in your career. One of the biggest challenges and real movers is making those that make decisions aware of you, making them comfortable with you, building trust with them, and very clearly articulating that, look, I want this job. I absolutely am looking for these opportunities to do those kinds of projects. And oh, by the way, here's all of the value I've added to this organization that prepares me to do so well. Mm-hmm. Right? And I think a lot of us, particularly women, we struggle with that. We struggle with tooting our own horns. But it's absolutely necessary for us to feel comfortable advocating for ourselves.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much. You know, I was going to ask for closing thoughts as I see we're coming up on 12:45, and Carmen, that was just perfect. I think I myself am going to replay that for all of my fellows and the entrepreneurs who follow us, and just remind people that that's so important. I think we may have lost Dr. Lindquist along the way from Puerto Rico. We lost signal there. But again, thank you, Carmen. Thank you, Shareene, for being with us. It's such an honor to have you with us, to see the great work that you're doing, and to really kind of want to continue to support that in whichever way we can, especially for the healthcare sector as well. Dr. Joe, I will give you last word.
Big thank you to Carmen and Shareene for joining us today. Really inspired by all the work that you do. Keep fighting the good fight. You're inspirational to all of us. Big thank you to MedTech Insights followers. This is us signing out. Really appreciate all of the audience that watched today. And you can find us next Tuesday at 12 noon. Thank you, guys.